All right, Paul Marie.
All right.
How are you?
I'm doing well. How are
Very
you?
nice to meet you.
Very nice to meet you too.
So, we met through a mutual friend,
hmm
and I was excited to sit down with you and just hear what you had to say. I know you're just moved here or recently, or
Just moved here. End of November
so
or end of October.
why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
Okay. So I was born in Ivory Coast, Côte d'Ivoire. Um, and up until the age of 5, that's where I lived with my mom. My dad was already living in America. So at the age of 6, moved to United States, in DC, Maryland, Silver Spring to be more exact. And yeah, Maryland has been home for a very, very, very long time. Went to elementary school there, went to a French international school up until 8th grade. Then decided to go to American system. Just wanted to check that out. So I did high school, and that was great. My first exposure to like real American high school.
Right, like not like in a little bubble.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Then after that, my journey, I feel like what leads to where I am today, probably really begins after high school for me.
Okay.
I guess for the next 10 years post high school, I just went on a series of different adventures to try to find myself, not realizing that's what I was doing, of course.
Yeah.
But yeah, it took me a while to figure out what I wanted to do and study in school. Went in for biology at first, ended up doing business. Post school, I did a bunch of different jobs. I did a lot of random jobs, definitely.
So this was after high school?
After college.
After college.
Yeah,
okay.
after college.
And where did you go to college?
University of Maryland.
University of Maryland.
Mhm.
Okay.
But I was still living at home actually while I was doing that, so I never really got the full college experience.
Okay.
But that's fine.
And so when did you guys what did your dad do? Was he here just working or?
So my dad worked for an airline company for U.S. Airways.
Okay.
So he was always gone, or his work schedule was just that we just didn't really spend that much time together.
Yeah.
My mom was a French professor at Washington International School.
Okay.
Yeah. Which is actually my link to our mutual friend.
Yeah, yeah. So we met through my last guest.
Mhm.
So that was a fun little like bridge
Mhm.
that we had to have you written right after her.
Oh,
to have
Yeah.
continuity.
Listen.
Have her come right back in and then sit down.
Right.
But yeah, that's the crazy thing is I didn't realize that there were so many French schools.
Yeah. Yeah. So WIS being, I guess, an international school where they focus on a variety of different languages, from Spanish to Dutch and French. But Rochambeau, where I went, is strictly just French.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so was that just to have like links to back home, or was that to just because that's what you spoke, or?
I think that is probably a combination of both. Well, I mean, my parents both were French school kids as well,
Okay.
right? Being in the Ivory Coast. So they just thought it was very important for me to get back into that system. They felt it was more rigorous. So
Yeah.
it's like, sure. It was, that experience.
That's what we did, so you're gonna do it. Kind of thing.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
Because it was the right thing to do. But Rochambeau was, I don't know, like French culture, especially in the high school or in the school system, still at the time very segregated and had very racist undertones, which maybe weren't so apparent to me at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But then, of course, later on as I grew up, I was like, oh yeah, that was fucked up.
What do you mean?
Cursing, okay?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, that was definitely fucked up. And what do I mean? So, I don't know, like being an African kid, right? And amongst all my other friends at Rochambeau, there was just this hierarchy, I guess, of the white, maybe more privileged French kids.
Yeah.
And then everybody else who, if you're a color, it's probably because you were colonized by the French.
Mm-hmm.
So,
If you're speaking French and you're not French,
exactly.
yeah, there's more likely not that they came at some point.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But somehow, I guess that history bleeds into the dynamics in the high school. It was really strange. So for the longest time, I remember not feeling beautiful or attractive just because, I was like, well, that's I was never considered that
In that world.
in that world, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it was just almost like, oh yeah, I guess I had internalized the belief that that was not a thing
Yeah.
until way later, until I want to say around the age of like 27, 28 is when I started to really find myself. And it's not coming from a vain place of saying, oh, I just think I look good, but I start to, I guess, accept myself for the way that I do look,
Yeah.
right? So as dark as my skin is, I'm like, I have to get to a place where I find that beautiful,
Yeah.
regardless of what everyone else
And so
thinks.
was there a time when you didn't feel that way? I mean,
Oh, for sure.
I mean, you were talking about you feeling that way a bit, but specific things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Or was it just an overall feeling of not belonging?
Yeah, I would say specifically, if I'm looking back, right, hindsight is always 2020. I wouldn't be out in the sun or wouldn't want to necessarily get darker.
To get darker.
I wouldn't
Yeah.
want to. That's like and I wouldn't want to because I guess subconsciously at the time I equated it to being less attractive.
Interesting.
As toxic as that is. Of course, I'm not there anymore, but that's definitely.
Where do you think that specifically came from? Do you think it was was it the school system, or do you think it was your friends, or was it,
It was probably a multitude of things, right?
Yeah.
Definitely the.
Because certainly, like your parents wouldn't say that to you.
No.
So
no.
that had to have come from an external place.
Yes, it had to come from an external place. It's funny when you say your parents wouldn't. That's true that my parents would never say that with the intent to make someone feel, I guess, not beautiful, right?
Right.
A comment about their skin. But I would say definitely in the African culture or just amongst my African family, there are comments made in passing of how beautiful someone is because they're so light. Right? Oh,
Yeah.
she has beautiful skin.
Yeah.
So subconsciously, you're making these connections and realizing, okay, this is deemed beautiful. This is not so much. Right?
Right.
So it's, I guess the human psyche is really important, fascinating, but you can start to build an internal self-image based off of not just the things that you're hearing, but sometimes the things that you're not hearing, right? The connections that you're making, or how do I say this? Deductions. So I think that's probably where I was at. Nobody explicitly ever has told me, oh, Paul, because you're dark skinned, you're not beautiful.
Right. I think when people hear that, or they hear people talking about their experience and growing up and feeling that way, or not belonging, not feeling they fit into the mold that was there, they think of it being that, and they think, no, I could never. Like, no one would say that. No, and of course, nobody probably would say that. Maybe they would, but extremely,
Yeah.
it's extreme.
Yeah.
But there's probably moments where you felt like you're comparing yourself.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And how did that make you feel?
I think every single time that I compared, I would always end up maybe not feeling so great, right? Because ultimately, I don't know, like ultimately I'm not that person. So I could find reasons before to, I guess, corroborate like why it is that I'm not dating, right? Or why is no one coming up to me or flirting with me? This is like, of course, like high school or whatever.
Yeah.
But later on, I guess after high school, I started to just slowly but surely undo a lot of those disempowering beliefs I had.
Do you feel like there was obviously a hierarchy there, and there was things that were making you feel that way, but do you think that you made it worse by internalizing it more and more and pushing yourself down even
for
more
sure.
and more?
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
I think by believing them,
Yeah.
right? I just believed it. So, but what's interesting? As much as I believed it, I want to say there was always a little voice inside of me that still didn't agree.
Right. Right.
So I believed it consciously, but maybe subconsciously somewhere I was still not fully accepting that was the reality.
Right.
And then I guess eventually when I got to in my 20s, started dating and stuff like that, then my self-image became a little bit more fortified.
So was this school was more, heavily, mainland French people, and then you had a few people that were not, and that's kind of, you're 90-10,
Yeah.
Is that probably
Absolutely.
accurate?
Yeah.
So that to me is really interesting, because that's it's like that kind of environment that you can easily, even if there was nothing from them, you would feel out of place, you know, and that's such a like, it's a unique feeling to feel like you don't belong somewhere because you look different.
Yeah.
Even if no one's, and you know, I'm sure there were things that happened, but even if no one's actually specifically saying it out loud, you're just looking with your eyes. You have eyes.
Absolutely.
You know?
Absolutely.
And so was that something that you, when you went to college, did it change? Were there more, or did you just kind of have to come to a more mature understanding?
I think I just had to come to a more mature understanding because if anything, during college, I didn't really have much of a love life going on in the college, right? Like I remember my first relationship was long distance, Montreal, DC. So
okay, yeah.
So I guess for me, actually, I can look back and say most of my growth occurred as a direct result of my relationships.
Right.
Like somehow each relationship built me up and broke me down in certain ways that allowed me to grow.
Right.
So some people, I guess, grow maybe more in social settings. Me, it was definitely as a result of my relationships.
Yeah, I don't know if I grow in social settings or not. I think it's probably I'm more with you, where I grow from one-on-one than a big group. But what age did you start at that school? Because you said that you were on Ivory Coast?
So it was in Ivory Coast.
Okay.
When I came to America, I did go to the
And
American.
tell people too, sorry to interrupt you, but tell people too where, like, just so they don't know where that is and what.
Yeah.
You know.
So Abidjan is the capital, and Ivory Coast is in West Africa. It's right on the hump, next to Ghana. I guess everyone knows where Ghana is. And from there, moved to United States, East Coast. I went to the American school system initially.
Yeah.
So I did kindergarten through, I want to say, second or third grade. I would definitely by third grade I was out because that's when I went to
French school. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that has to be, you know, we were talking with Mimi about it as well, but that's got to be difficult to, you almost have like three cultures. Like you're in the American culture here, you also have the French culture that you speak at home. I'm guessing you spoke French at home.
Absolutely.
And then you also have your African culture as well, which is where you're from.
Yeah.
So it's like this like convergence of three different things, pulling you in three different directions. They're all very different.
Absolutely.
And,
Absolutely.
you know, when at least today it's maybe a little bit different, but at that time, you know, probably in like the late 90s to mid thousands, it was not as common, you know, and especially with the internet being probably not as big as it was.
It was, yeah, for sure.
It's very different.
Yeah.
And so did you ever feel like you were being pulled in different directions?
You know, it's funny. Since that's all I ever knew, it almost just became my, for me, it was just like my status quo.
You were like a blended identity. You
Exactly.
just accepted it from the get-go.
Exactly. So I always joke, I tell people, like, when you're from an African family or immigrant family and you're living in America, you're still very much living in that country that you're from.
Right.
Because every time you walk through the door, every time I would come back home, I was in Ivory Coast. Like the food, the culture, everything. So I just, for me, I guess that always was the norm.
Is there kind of a, maybe you can describe for people, like people who are Black in America, born in America, they have a very different culture than people who are from Africa.
Absolutely.
So you almost, you know, just because they maybe look like you doesn't, they don't share that same experience that you do.
They don't.
So you have a whole different thing to deal with, aside from everything else that you're going through as a kid, going through, everyone goes through awkward stages and trying to figure out how to communicate and be around people, but you have this added extra burden on top of it.
And then you add being gay and you're like, oh,
yeah.
Let's make this is expert level.
Yeah.
Let's do this.
So how did that come about? So when did you realize that you?
So I've always known personally.
Okay.
I think I've from a very young age. I want to say I was still living in Ivory Coast, so it has to be even 4 years old. I was always more sexually aware than I think most people are at that age. Yeah, I don't know. I just knew. I just was always aware of that.
Something was different than everyone else. Yeah.
But I also clocked very quickly that the difference about me was not okay. I knew that also very young.
Yeah.
So Yeah, I guess, yeah, I definitely knew.
That it was something just to kind of keep
Exactly.
hidden.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, of course, to what degree, I think that just evolved with time. But
Right.
I always had that knowing. And then that knowing turned into, and by the way, that knowing, of course, now I'm saying it's knowing, but at the time I was in denial, right? So denial implies that you still have knowledge of it. You're just not acknowledging it.
You're just pretending it doesn't
Exactly.
exist.
Exactly. Whereas
We're not doing that. We're going to do this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. We're just gonna. And so, yeah, I think I want to say that's where I was, and then my denial just evolved into just full on rejection of that. Right? Like I just rebuked it.
And where did that come from? So what was rejecting it for you?
The fact that I knew that for religious reasons, of course, like I knew that it wasn't okay, and God said no, and it's just not okay, not approved of. I knew my parents wouldn't approve of it either, and actually, crazy enough, because they didn't approve, I didn't approve. So I was actually a full-fledged homophobe for sure, 100%.
Do you think that's something that people tend to be aware of when they see someone who's very homophobic? Like almost unnecessarily. To where there's a difference between being straight and just not into that, which I have plenty of friends who are. And then there's people who go above and beyond to kind of, attack people for being different. And it makes me kind of look at you and go, what's there?
Yeah. Mine was more covert in the sense that I would never come out and say to anyone that was gay, oh, you're disgusting or whatever. I would never do that. But my thoughts were that you were unclean.
Yeah.
That you weren't okay. And it's crazy because that kind of, how do I say this, belief that I had, the way that would manifest even post coming out is when Lil Nas X, for example, dropped that video of, or what was it, Call Me By Your Name. And he performed at, I think it was a BET Awards or something, and they made out with a guy.
Yeah.
I watched that and was so uncomfortable. I was so uncomfortable.
Even now.
And the thing is, I made myself watch it over and over and over again purposely, just because I was like, I'm now aware of how I see this, but I'm going to consciously undo this and condition myself to realize this is normal. It's normal. So, yeah, that's
Where
also.
do you think that comes from? That uncomfortableness? Because I know exactly what you're talking about.
It comes from a deep subconscious belief that you're witnessing something that's not okay.
Yeah.
It has to be, or else it has to be. It has to be something that maybe somewhere deep in there. And by the way, that's okay, right? I think as humans, you're always going to have biases, but by becoming aware of them, then you can consciously redirect your brain in a way that I think eventually just becomes autopilot, right? You just
everyone has natural tendencies to be biased for sure, but there is something that's interesting to me where you take it from just having a bias that you kind of just need to quietly just either deal with or avoid or fix, but when it goes to a situation where you're actively trying to it's almost like you're trying to show everybody else, like, see how bad this is over here, don't look at me over here, it's almost like you don't want them to spot it in you.
Yeah.
And that's where it's always when I see people who are really homophobic, it does make me kind of go, oh, there's something there, because that's a person who just isn't interested just would move on. They'd walk by, they wouldn't care. And
what's interesting, I find that at this particular state of my journey where I'm at now, I don't care to hide my identity in any way, right? I try to show up as authentically as possible all the time, just because now I have more self-love and I accept myself. But whenever it does arise, I guess that I will slip back into that mindset before of wanting to hide. It has to do with Black women. So,
interesting.
Because my mom, to me, is her and I are, I think that is I want to say maybe most karmic relationship. We're just very close.
Yeah.
And at the same time, of course, as it would be, she is the one who has the most issues with accepting.
Right.
Right. And I'll tell the story of where we're at now and what transpired over the last 2.5 years. But because I don't know, most of my internalized hatred that I had before came from a place of not wanting to disappoint her, because I've lived my life, I think, in a way where I would do anything for my mom, anything, just to make her happy. That was just because I've seen her do that for me, right? And so the one thing that I know weighs so heavy on her heart and she wishes were different, that is something that's out of my, I can't give as much as I wanted to for the longest time, but I just realized I don't have the ability to do that. And actually now I have more just overall spiritual wisdom to know me trying to live a life that is out of alignment with who I am would be doing a disservice to me as well, and her.
I think that's something really, I want you to elaborate on that too. What would you say that it took you time to come to terms with not only who you are, but also to live that way without censoring yourself? Because I can tell, like, just from personal experience, I mean, there's even instances recently where I drop myself into this shroud of normality. So when people make a comment, I find myself going, yeah, and I just kind of go this way because I don't even want to deal with it. And I still find myself dealing with the fact that I'm, when I'm around people that I don't know, it's not natural for me just to be like, oh yeah, so here's my boyfriend, here's this, here's that. It's a very self-censoring thing. And that's why when I hear about things like what you're talking about, it kind of is something where it's that little voice in your head. It's like, oh, this isn't normal, so we need to, it's not normal because it's often hidden. Doesn't mean that it's wrong. It just means that it's been essentially like, shoved down. And I would probably wager that your mom, it's all cultural and all systemic and from where she grew up. So that's also ingrained in her. So it's this thing where it maybe gets weaker over time.
Yes.
But have you found yourself, I don't know if it's the right word is self-censorship, but have you found yourself kind of hiding that or
so
just choosing not to even go there?
I know, right? I know. Sometimes, trust me, I was like, let's just pretend this isn't here. I've done that actually. That's actually probably a superpower that I have.
Yeah.
I can just pretend like something's not.
Yeah.
But so, okay. I came out to my family 2 years exactly today, 4/20/2019.
Oh, okay.
And the way that it happened was very, of course, chaotic and just also very abrupt, like just kind of a fight like an argument broke out and then yelling words were said.
Just decided it
just happened. Well, she kind of forced it out of me. But I realized now why it
Who forced it? Your mom did? Okay.
Yeah. And I realized why it had to happen that way, because right before, up until that point, I had gotten to a point where I was ready to live in the closet for the rest of my life until she died. I had actually accepted that. And funny enough, in my mind, the way that I saw things at that time, that was loving her. That was me showing love, was putting my life on hold or live in obscurity, basically, for her sake. Now, of course, then the coming out happened. Of course, I didn't have a choice. It just happened. And it was not good, but kind of severed my relationship with my mom for a while. Like we just weren't not talking on good terms. I then moved to Amsterdam to live with my partner.
So you went from DC to Amsterdam?
I did.
Okay.
I said, get me out of here. So I went to Amsterdam. I moved July of 2019 to live with a partner. And this is the funny part. So even moving there and living with him, I still had not told my parents that, one, I had a boyfriend, two, I was living with him. They thought I was over there and that I was living.
Playing single life.
Exactly. Or living with my my cousin also that lives over there.
Okay.
So they thought,
at least there's some kind of connection there. It wasn't just a random.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we dated for a year and a half. For a year and a half, my parents had no idea that I was living over there with somebody in a whole relationship. And one issue that we had over the course of a relationship is that he would always tell me, like, why don't you tell them? Why don't you tell your mom or dad about me and stuff like that? My answer was that she was not ready. I was like, she's not ready. Baby steps. I just came out. Let her swallow.
Was he European or was
European?
he?
Yeah,
Okay,
Dutch.
so,
Dutch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Easier for them sometimes.
Of course. And his family is like super loving, open family, open arms, everything. So
even if you have a super loving, open arms family, there's a I don't even know the right word. It's not delusion, but you do create a problem where it doesn't exist. So even if you have a family that's accepting, because I actually have been lucky enough to have that, I didn't think it would go that way.
Okay.
And that was the weird thing for me. I was like, oh, this is nice.
Yeah.
But it was not. So you're building it up into this thing that it's not. And that can damage. That can cause years of damage as well. So it's for him to have that. I bet there's not really though an understanding of like, no, I can't just tell them.
Yeah,
exactly.
It's
not. It doesn't work that way.
It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
But what I learned was that the reason why it didn't work that way was actually the reason why I guess I moved to Amsterdam, not realizing, of course, the universe that was the plan.
Right.
But I had to undo. Now that the hard part was out, I'm out. I'm gay, sure. The hard part now begins, which is undoing, erasing all of those disempowering beliefs that I had about myself and that I had internalized and taken on as a part of my identity.
Such as like, to explain to people like what little things like that.
For example, that actually by me being gay, yes, right, I'm gay. But by me being gay, I'm less clean. I'm less, I don't know, saved.
Defective.
I'm defective. Something's wrong. And I would never have, how do I say this? I would have never said those things about myself, right? However, I knew that by telling my mom, hey, by the way, I have a boyfriend or whatever, she would, of course, repeat those things that she had said once upon a time.
You're reopening the wound. Yeah.
And the reason why that wound, it was so painful is because the words that you're saying are finding a home in me. They're resonating with something that I believe about myself. Because otherwise they wouldn't.
Okay.
They would just be words, right? Like at the end of the day, also I've realized in that moment that we're the ones who assign power or meaning to words, right? So the power for words to affect you actually rely in you, not so much on the other person saying those words.
Say that again, because that's a really interesting thing.
Like the power that words have actually are internal.
You control
the power that they have. The other person is just making sounds with their mouth, right? I'm the one assigning meaning to that. So I realized why I never told my mom is because up until right when we broke up, I knew that everything that she would say would resonate with me, and then I'd be triggered, and I'm mad, and I'm sad, and
you're just in this place where you don't need to be.
Exactly. So that's really what I'm avoiding. But something happened over the course, and I spent COVID, like the lockdown over there, and
this is all recent.
Yeah. And during the lockdown, I don't know, I guess that was the beginning of a lot of just internal growth and just overall self-love that began.
We all had way too much time with ourselves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I spent a lot of time in there. But as a result, at the end of it, and I guess it just is a coincidence as it was the day right after we broke up, I was filled with so much courage that I wrote my mom and told her everything. Told her I'd been living with him. I was in a relationship with him. I just told her everything, and I actually made a decision that day to never lie to her again. So I was like, I'm never going to lie to you. Anything you want to know, ask me. If you don't want to know, don't ask me. But I'm just not going to lie to you. And I'm also able to realize fully now that who I am in my entirety is okay, is more than okay. It's actually great. Part of your journey is coming to that understanding. So now I have to make a decision. I'm either going to love you unconditionally through it and see that you get to that destination, or I can decide to shut you out and be like, okay, I'm out. I made the choice to love you unconditionally and still be there for you. So till this day, my mom will say stuff this morning on the phone about, I don't know, something that otherwise would have been triggering for me about gays, or I think it was something about two dads or whatever.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, well, you know, I fully disagree with you on what you just said, and I'll tell you why. And yeah, I'm hoping that each time that I engage with her in a loving way, that it's me planting a seed, and I'll wait as long as I need to wait for that seed to grow, but you're not triggering anymore. Like, sure.
I think it's important to like recognize too that you went through this childhood, which we didn't talk a ton about your childhood, but at least your schooling.
Mm-hmm.
You felt out of place.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you talk about like racism in a French school, or you talk about not feeling belonging, it's all being internalized over time. And people that always feel like they belong,
mm-hmm.
it's not even their it's not their fault. They never felt like they don't belong, so they can never feel how you feel.
Mm-hmm.
And so when that thing stays with you, and you're feeling like you don't belong, you're different, you're not, you know, your nose is different, your eyes are
mm-hmm.
different, your eyebrows are different, all these things. And then to add on top of that, you're also different from your own culture as well. So your upbringing and everything that you should be the man and woman and this and all that and all that as well. So you don't belong at school, you don't belong at home, you really don't belong anywhere. You have to find your own place, which is what I think is extraordinary.
Yes.
So most people at least can feel like they belong at school. They can feel like they belong at home. They can have friends. They can, there's ways of coping. But at least what I find interesting about you is that, you're these contradictions of everywhere you were.
Yeah.
And so, you're at school. You don't belong there because of X, Y, and Z. You're at home. You're having to hide who you are there as
mm-hmm.
well. It's homophobia and racism and all these different things. We talk about it so much, and people sometimes will be like, I'm tired of hearing about it. But it's like, but the reality is you're a child who's, you're not growing up properly.
Mm-hmm.
You're being ostracized for no reason.
Mm-hmm.
And when you add that plus being gay,
mm-hmm.
it's like a double shot of this, it's two things that you have to deal with. These are two life, altering things you have to deal with.
But I will say, I will say the reward though, where I feel like I'm at now, is because I've gone through all that, like you said, not feeling
right.
like I fit in anywhere else, overcoming that and getting to a place now where I've fully accepted myself and love myself. I now feel in any situation, I feel, how do I say this? Just aligned. I don't feel out of place. I feel at peace.
Yeah.
Because the common denominator now is just me.
Yeah.
Right.
But you had to really work at it.
Ooh.
You had to come to that perspective.
Yeah.
And you had to get there from there. And it wasn't just an overnight thing.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit more about that.
It was not an overnight thing.
Yeah.
I definitely came out to my friends, I want to say earlier in my 20s. And then that probably, I would say, from the age of 21 to when I came out 29, that time was full of just me slowly but surely getting more comfortable in my own skin with my friends. But I guess up until that last point, I still needed to get rid of those last little major roadblocks, which is, and that was like the final boss, which is my parents. But then actually the final boss, I would say, would be the emptiness and the space that is just you afterwards, right? Because then afterwards,
the final boss is yourself.
It's yourself. It's just you.
Yeah.
It's you and your thoughts. Yeah. Like, are you gonna overcome those beliefs, or are you gonna let them affect you, right?
I mean, there's people who live their entire lives basically lying to themselves,
mm-hmm.
and eventually a wife and kids as well.
And I honestly, I never judge people who either come out late in life or who never come out.
Absolutely, yeah.
Just because now I understand.
It's not easy.
It's not easy. But what's not easy is the mental prison that you've put yourself in. And for you, you're not realizing that it is a mental prison, right? Like, you're not realizing that I'm the one who is putting up these bars.
And that's what I think is important to get across. I want you to go maybe a little bit more in depth about that, because I think that can help a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I know there's people out there that it's not necessarily the family, it's not necessarily the friends, because those things are, family is important and friends are important and your those systems are important, but you are important. You know, you being happy with yourself and your life choices are important. So was there anything that you did specifically to start to break those things down, or was it just time?
I would say this.
How do you tell yourself over and over, I'm normal, I'm not normal, I'm normal, I'm not normal? How do you get past that?
I don't know. My brain works in a very, how do I say this? Like a highly logical way. So the way that I debunk theories in my head is if I'm able to see the same situation apply.
Like an equation.
An equation.
Yeah.
So, and this is a very dumb example I'm about to give, but if somebody said, oh, it is impossible to jump if you're wearing blue socks. You can't jump if you're wearing blue socks. Great. And everyone accepts that as the norm. If I see one person jump and they have blue socks on, for me, done. Like, one person did that. So now I know that it is possible. So throw it all out the trap. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I say that because...
And then it becomes illegal to jump and wear blue socks.
Hello? Yeah. But for me, I guess, with all the disempowering beliefs I had about homosexuality, I'm like, okay, great. Let's tackle one. If you're gay, you are, God hates you, for example, and that you are unpure. Okay. I can sit here and be like, well, I've met some gay people that are very successful, right? Not talking about like, we know like the Ellen DeGeneres and other people, but there are a multitude of people who are homosexual and doing very well, and who are healthy and who are happy and who are seemingly living a blessed life. Yeah. So for me, I'm like, okay. I also know some people who are heterosexual who are not living miserable. So
is God punishing them?
Is God punishing exactly
and allowing them to thrive?
So for me, just looking from those two's perspective, I'm like, I cannot say that homosexuality is causational to misery, because few people over here have debunked that theory, and a few people over here have also debunked that theory. So I have to get to a point where I'm like, okay, why am I believing this if there is a set number of examples that debunk that?
Right.
So I guess that's where it started for me, where I was like, okay, I don't really think that, okay. Then when I was 15 is when I really got into like religion. And I told my parents I want to get baptized. I was the one who decided. So I went to catechism classes and got baptized. At that point, I was the most connected to my Christianity I had ever been. And then I remember going to class one day, and they brought up the concept of when you go talk to the priest and you... Confession. Yeah. And the concept of confession is whenever you do something that is deemed unworthy by God, you need to go to a priest for them to pray for you and for them to basically ask God for forgiveness. And I don't know why. It probably has to do with my composition, how I am as a person. But that right there was what caused me to say, oh, okay, so you guys don't know what you're talking about. Because I always felt like, in God's eyes at least, we were all definitely equal. For some reason, I was always sure about that. I don't know why. I just was always sure that whatever God is, every single person, everything that he makes, for that matter, is equal in her eyes, his eyes. So for you to tell me that I need to go through someone else in order to communicate with said God, you've lost me, because I already know that God would not make me and have a gatekeeper and say, okay, but you can't communicate with me, girl. You got to hit me up between. You know what I'm saying? That's not, it didn't sit well with my spirit. I was like, oh, this is just not true. Yeah. So that is when my separation from organized religion began, and my journey with whatever you want to call it, God, my personal journey with it started.
And unpacking yourself a little more.
Yeah. And figuring out the parts of myself that, when it came down to it, I was like, listen, I tried to pray the gay away for a very long time. I think during the age of like 10 to 20, every birthday when I would be blowing out my candles, that is what I would be wishing for. Nobody knows, but I would be blowing up and be like, please, like, just please make me straight. Please. Like, I'll do whatever. I'll do whatever I need to do. And it wouldn't work. And then got to the point where I was like, okay, again, the logic. Would God have made me this way if obviously it's something I can't get rid of? I've been trying. I've been really trying to, I've been really trying. And it's not budging. So again, I have to also believe that if he made me this way, then he intended to make me this way, right? Because I also don't believe that whatever it is, God's spirit doesn't make any mistakes. So that, I think, coming together, I hate bringing religion into it because I know religion is very triggering.
It's important, though. It's important because it affects so many people.
Yeah.
And there's religion that helps people. I think that it's important for people to have something that gives them some kind of meaning to everything. Mm-hmm. It's not a pretty thought to just think we're just gone and that's it. And there's no...
Yeah.
It's scary.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, I think people suffer because they have this religion that's been intertwined with cultures for 1,000 years. Mm-hmm. You have these things that have kind of congealed together and warped things a bit. Mm-hmm. And so when you talk about a religion that's all about love and this and that, I mean, I'm on board with it. But then when you start talking about this person's, a demon, they're wrong, they're this, and it's like, well, aren't you supposed to not be judging them? I mean, isn't that the big thing?
Yeah.
And the problem is when they're so convinced that they're right, there's nothing really you can say to convince them. They have to have that same understanding that you did. You have to come to terms with it and unravel whatever it is. And some people are so far.
Yes.
I know people that they're just so far deep in that world, and they're unhappy. Mm-hmm. Deep down. They can post about how happy they are. Mm-hmm. They can throw their arm around their girlfriend all they want, but
yes.
that they're struggling, and they're in a prison.
Yes.
And if they would just have an interpretation of their religion, whatever it is, that accepted them, there's a big difference between being a horrible person and being gay, and they kind of conflate the two things.
Yes.
They equate, that with murder.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely.
They talk about it worse than if you were a murderer.
They also always tie it in with pedophilia.
Yeah.
Which I'm like, oh my God.
It's always easy. As if there's no straight people that are pedophiles.
That are like pedophiles. I'm like,
break.
there's no correlation between that, guys, but okay.
Okay. Let's, we can give you plenty of examples too.
Yeah.
But it's incredible to me that they're so, it's like convincing yourself. Mm-hmm. And the worst people that kind of going back to that homophobia thing, the worst ones are the most suspicious to me. Mm-hmm. Because they're trying to convince themselves. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, like you said, I wouldn't care.
You wouldn't care.
I just would be like, well, okay, it's not for me. Yeah. I have friends that's like, that's not for me. Yeah. But, there's nothing wrong with that.
And there's also something crazy about even just saying like, that's not for me. Because when I had a conversation with one of my straight friends and he was like, I'm cool with gay people. It's just like, I'm just like,
It's got that like twinge of like, just keep it over there, though.
Keep it over there. Yeah. And I'm like, okay. But let's just flip that in a different way, right? Let's just say I'm a straight man, and I'm like, I don't know, I like women. I'm not really into blondes, so like just keep it over there. Blondes don't,
Yeah, it's a bit. There's a bit of a backhandedness to it.
Yeah, but it's also strange. It's like you're not into that.
But it's baby steps to me. At least to me, it's like it could be much worse.
You're right.
It could be. They're trying.
You're right.
But I totally it's totally a just a bit of like a backhanded compliment there. It's not. It's a little bit of like well, as long as you just keep it over there. Mm-hmm. But it is a it's one of those things where you're like, okay, well,
like the gag is I wasn't even looking at you.
I wasn't into you anyway, so that's okay. But that's the funny part is, to me, what I've always found interesting about that kind of dynamic with someone is the people who are the most afraid of gay people tend to be the people, in my opinion, at least I can't speak for women because that's a whole different world, but for men who are afraid of gay people, I always word it and explain it to people like, well, you're afraid that they're going to treat you the way you treat women. Mm-hmm. They're going to be afraid that you're going to hit on them. and they're uncomfortable, and you're going to keep doing it because that's what you do to women. And you kind of subconsciously know that when you catcall people and you do these things and you know, you make people feel uncomfortable, that guy's going to turn around and do it to you, and you're going to feel uncomfortable.
Yes.
And so that's always been something that I always kind of watch, because there'll be people that will do that. They'll be all, you know, awkward, or actually no, they'll be normal around you until they find out, and then they'll be awkward. And I'm like, what's changed? Nothing's changed. You can have a platonic, normal relationship with someone and not be interested in them. You know,
because I'm sure as a straight man, you have friends that are female.
Right.
But you know what? I actually find that kind of internalized homophobia, what I say to straight men is, I think it comes from a place of you're subconsciously, and you're going to be like, what? But hear me out. I think when you don't fully value women, right? For example, you actually subconsciously think that women are secondary, come second to men. So anything that is closer to female actually becomes
like a second class.
Yeah, like almost I have the French word, but I can't thinking. Bringing down a class, or bringing down
I think
degraded.
the expression is you bring them down a peg.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you see what I'm saying? Like
Yeah,
anything that gets closer to masculinity is seen as elevated. It's made better.
That's when you have a strict paradigm of being, you know, man is this. He's he goes and hunts and he does all this stuff. And then on the flip side over here, woman is, you know, the caricature of what a woman is. And if that's you, there's nothing wrong with that. Like to me, but it's not. Yeah. It's not about comparing other people to that though. So if someone is a little bit more feminine but he's a man, or someone's a little more masculine as a female, because I hear it about women all the time. If there's like a girl who loves sports, it's like talking like she's a lesbian. Yeah, that has nothing to do with it.
But they also equate some sort of like, how do I say this? It's better. Like, for example, when it comes to colorism, the lighter you are in skin tone, the prettier you're considered. Right. Not to everybody, I'm just saying. But the reason why you have that belief is because you find whiteness to be better, quote unquote. Do you see what I'm saying? That if whiteness if it was just different.
So you're saying they treat masculinity that way.
It's better. It's better than female.
It's what you should be.
Exactly.
And so you're wrong. There's something wrong with you.
So if you're a lesbian, for example, and you're butch, oh my God, you're great. You're fine. You know what I'm saying? Or if you're just a lesbian, like you're into women, just like men are, that's also tends to be more socially accepted.
That's very interesting that it is more socially accepted.
But if you're a gay man and you're a feminine gay man at that's where you get the most resistance, right? Yeah. Like, why is it that feminine men are I don't know, demonized more than the masculine one? Oh, is it because being more feminine is not as good as being more masculine? Yeah. Do you see what I'm saying? So somewhere in there, there's maybe they're not realizing that they have this internalized belief
that's been set up
that masculinity is up here, femininity is down there. So.
That's really interesting. Going back to what you were just saying too, with straight people, straight men in general, they're really usually okay with lesbians. So that is an interesting point, because I never thought of it that way. I always wondered why that's the thing. Yeah. They almost are like happy about it. Yeah. Even though those women are not interested in them, there's something about it that is non-threatening. Yeah.
100%. And you asked me earlier, so how did I get to the place where I'm at now, where I've kind of grown into accepting myself? Yeah. I think what I try to do is...
pull this up a little more closer to you there. You can pull it by over here. And then just there you go. So it's a little more.
I think what I try to do actively is whenever I have a belief, something that I'm realizing, I think this way, I try to get down to the root of why it is that I believe it to be this way. And then at the roots, you figure out now, okay, is it true or is it not true? Yeah, I think that's how I got to the place where I'm at, because I'm like, okay, why is it do I think this way? Okay, well, let's see, where does this come from? Are women actually not as smart or capable as men? No. Okay, are women or men are actually equal? Do I truly believe that? I can say that consciously, but a funny example is, as much as of a feminist as I am, My ex once said a joke, he was like, Paul, there is a father and son in a car, and they get into a car crash, and the father dies. And the ambulance gets there in time to be able to save the kid, rushes him to the hospital, and the doctor comes in and says, oh, I can't work on this kid, it's my son. And he goes, how is that possible? When I tell you I spent 15 minutes just going through every single scenario, I was like, it's a brother, it's the dad's brother. No, okay. His twin brother came back. No, I went through everything, and then for him to say,
I remember this one too. Yeah,
it's his mom.
Yeah,
and I said, oh, for me actually, even I know it's supposed to be like a little like
the nurse didn't come in, like that was your thought.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah, you said the doctor came in,
and it's such a like fucked up.
But the beauty about that moment is, I became so aware of a bias that I have.
Yeah.
So now I consciously undo that bias whenever I get the chance. So if someone says to me something, my boss, I go, oh, is she? I will automatically purposely go in that route until for them to say, oh, it's actually a male or whatever.
Well, it's certain professions like that too. There was a bias. There's, you know, we were just driving on a road trip. We were going to a project, and we decided to drive, and there was a female truck driver on the road, and I just was like, that's weird. I'd never seen that, but they exist. You know, there's that tendency to only really acknowledge what you're aware of.
Yeah.
And that's what fuels people's biases to anything. And bias is not inherently evil or anything wrong with it, because everyone does it. It's just whether or not you address it and just adjust.
Exactly.
It's not saying you're a nasty, horrible person. It's just saying, you know, you can't walk through life without growth.
Exactly.
You have to adjust things as you go.
Yes.
And as long as you're trying, then that's okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's a very I remember that specific. It's not a brain teaser, but it's like a like just one of those quirky kind of joke kind of things. But it makes you think, oh wait, how did I not think that?
The craziest thing is I said that same joke to 3 different women, and they still also couldn't find it. The answer.
It's crazy.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's just, I think we need to get to a place where we realize that we all have biases, all of us, and we all have empowered beliefs about ourselves, and maybe we have some disempowering beliefs. That's literally part of the human experience. But coming to terms with what they are, and not letting them unconsciously rule your life, I think is where I'm trying to get at. Like,
that's a very mature way of looking at it.
Yeah,
it's a very like. People tend to not look at things with that much introspection, and also that kind of, you know, looking at things as a part of a whole, as opposed to just these little pieces, little moments.
Well, to your point, I think I was kind of conditioned to think that way because I never had a group that I could just latch on to and say, oh, all this group of people think like this, so I'm gonna come in with these guys and just take on these beliefs onto me. I never had that to a certain degree. I
don't know how you feel about it, but from just talking to you, it feels like that was a blessing in disguise, that you didn't turn out just like them, because it forced you to kind of have your own way of thinking.
Yeah.
And that's a really special thing, that you can kind of process things and look at things objectively and have this kind of. And I'm very like that too.
Yeah.
And maybe there's something there where it's like, you know, when you're in this kind of situation, you have to kind of start to rationalize and analyze things in a way. But like what you were saying, when it's like a math problem, that's very much how I think about things.
Right.
When I think about a problem or something I'm dealing with, it's very like X plus Y equals this, you know, and I have to like piece it together. And I think it's a strength for sure.
Tell me if you agree, but I also, one thing I like about the way that I maybe think is, it allows me to see more clearly and not get distracted. So, for example, when the whole George Floyd thing happened across the world, everybody started marching and protesting Black Lives Matter. And I was definitely very vocal about that, even in Amsterdam, and definitely made an effort to really be a part of that movement. It was never lost on me that the cause I'm supporting, and the people that are affected, Black men, out of all these Black men, 90% of them would not be showing up if this cause was to support me in my sexuality as a gay man. You know what I'm saying? So I'm aware my reasons being there are for the right thing. I'm here for because it is.
Because it's the right thing to do.
It's because it's the right thing to do,
Yeah.
right? It's not because I feel like I'm part of some group or whatever. I just feel like this is the right thing to do. It's not fair for.
That's an interesting point, and it's something that I think is difficult for a lot of people who are, basically just not straight. Is that there's no doubt that feeling in your mind, you probably wouldn't, if this had happened to me, you probably wouldn't be there.
You wouldn't be here, but that's okay.
But that's okay.
That's okay. Yeah.
You don't have to be.
You don't have to be at all.
But it's just something that is definitely in the back of your mind, and it probably colors how you treat situations and how you are probably very aware of the fact that you have to be, I hate to say better, but you have to kind of lead the way there and show how you want people to treat each other, as opposed to complaining about, it does no good to just, well, you wouldn't do it for me, so I'm not going to do it for you.
Yeah, no.
It's better to do it and say, see, this is why I'm here.
It's for that reason that, for example, if a white person says something that is maybe, or asks me something about the Black experience that, normally I feel like you could just go Google, right? If you want to know
Yeah.
There's the age of technology, you can find out whatever it is that you want to find out.
Right.
But I personally, I know most Black people don't agree with this, but for me personally, if that opportunity presents itself for it to be a teachable moment with a white person, I'm going to take it. Doesn't matter how, even though I feel like you should know this or whatever, this is an opportunity for me to connect with you as a human being, and for you to be able to, for my words to really have an impact on you and affect change. And what I care about is the change. So
I've talked about this with people before. I've talked about it with you. I've talked about it with a few people. And I will say, I think that you taking the time to talk to them, even if it feels like something that they should know, or maybe you kind of think, how could you not know this? You taking the time to talk to them will have way more impact than just Googling it. And in the end, that's what you want.
Yeah.
It's a burden.
Yeah.
And it's not something that maybe, is fair.
Yeah.
But the result would be better.
Better.
And so it's one of those things where it's like, I don't tend to ask people those kind of things. I do here, obviously. This is the whole point. But in everyday life, I don't pull people aside and ask them to explain something to me. But some people, I think, are more comfortable talking that way. And so it's a hard thing, because it does become a burden for people.
Now,
it's the same thing with someone asking you about being gay.
Yeah.
They ask you and you have to explain to them, well,
I'll explain. But if you're not receptive, if I'm dealing with somebody who's not receptive,
that's different.
I'm not going to waste my time.
That's different.
Yeah,
that's totally different. But if they're asking and they just want to know and they're wanting to listen to you, that's a good moment.
Yeah.
But that works for anything. That works for whatever your experience is.
Absolutely.
It's just something where, if they're not receptive though, then
I'm not even wasting my time.
What's the point? That's not. I've noticed that with being gay in general, or bi in general, is, people have their own opinions. They have their own set agenda or opinion. You're not going to change them right then and there. And I don't think there's any point in trying. And I know a lot of people try to do that. They try and get a win. They try and sit down and just drill it into their head and think that they're just going to come away and everyone's going to be on the same page. And it's just not going to happen.
No, that's ego.
It's something you have to, like what you're talking about. You're showing by doing. By showing up there and doing what you were doing, you're leading by example.
Trying to the best of my abilities.
And
at least.
over time, you will reach those people. You'll reach certain people, and some people are never going to be receptive.
Yeah.
And that is what it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
So going back though to you growing up, how did you deal with those conflicting feelings?
My ignore game is strong. I can just
pretend.
I can just pretend. I think, I've always put a lot of emphasis growing up on the comfort of the people around me. That was always my main focus, on how happy they were. And I actually found pleasure through that, weirdly enough. So if they were happy, then I'm happy. At least I thought I was. But, you know, I'm thinking...
You rationalize at the point where, well, I can deal with this.
I can deal with this. I'm okay. And, you know, I try, you know, do the math and think, okay, you know what? Overall, this is a good investment to do. Of course, now I would never forsake myself in that way.
Right.
But that's because I have a whole new vantage point, right? Where I'm seeing things for what they are, in my opinion. So I've realized, okay, I just need to be... Whenever I'm dealing with conflict or whatever it is around me, I will always deal with it in a loving way, but never betray myself in the process. So I'll never do something or say something that I don't mean.
What do you mean by that? So you're when you're conversing with someone about something that's emotional, you're saying you won't.
So, for example, I'll just use my mom, for example, talking with her. If she says something that is about gays or whatever, the way that I'll deal with it is by telling her that I disagree. I'll tell her how I see it, and I won't fight with her. I definitely won't. I won't fight, and I will just agree to disagree. I would actually agree to disagree, but I will still make sure I get my point out there. So a seed at least is planted. But I won't betray myself by pretending that, okay, you know, maybe one day I'll find a girlfriend, you know, like maybe one day, you know, something to just appease you, to make you feel.
I've heard that from many people.
Yeah.
And that, to me, at least from just looking as an outsider on that situation and here, that gives them the seed in the wrong direction.
The seed.
So that gives them, when you say, well, maybe someday, just trying to get out of the conversation, that plants the seed in them that says, well, maybe, you know,
Absolutely.
maybe he's coming around.
Absolutely.
You know, if you give any inch like that to who you are, now if that's who you are, if you're bisexual or if you're whatever,
Yeah.
But if you're let's say, because you're gay, and you're going and you're saying, well, you know, someday maybe, you just set yourself back 10 years.
Absolutely.
And so you have to be it's what the theme of this whole conversation seems to be burden, because we keep saying, well, now it's your burden to be careful what you say, not upset someone, because then they're not going to listen. Also trying to get your point across in a clean, clear way that helps, you know, get your point across, but also not fight them on it, even though they can say things that are hurtful. You have to hold yourself back. But that's just the life that you've been handed. You've been handed this life where you have to be better, and you have to know what you can and can't say to get the point across to someone. And it's not something that anybody would envy.
No.
But I do think it makes you a better person, a stronger person.
I think so too.
Because you have to learn to navigate all of these things. You know, I can just drop myself in a shroud of being normal. You know, when you're growing up, I always tell people this, because I'm like, you know, being like, you know, gay is one thing, but being gay and black is another thing, because then you have two things you got to deal with. And it's not ideal to have both of those two things together all the time. And it's ridiculous that anybody would say, there's no difference. It's like, of course there is. Yeah. Would you want to be that? You know, would you want to be different from everyone else? No. Now double it and have it be two different reasons. So it's really incredible to me that you have to come through all of this and still have your sanity.
Yeah, it would. I think there was a lot of catalyst for change. Yeah. A lot. But I always say the catalyst for change is discomfort. So there was a lot of discomfort. Oh my gosh, there was a lot. But now on the other side of it, there's actually quite a lot more peace, I think, for me at least, than I guess the other people that I know in my life, like my other straight counterparts that have not maybe accepted themselves fully in different ways.
It's the one thing that you've said that resonated with me the most was saying like that, treating it kind of like a video game, but the final boss being yourself.
Absolutely.
Because I do really think that everybody views their family as the final boss, but that's not the reality. That's like the little mini boss beforehand. The reality is when you can accept you being who you are, and live yourself without being somewhere and pretending you're not, or pretending you're not different, or all these things. That's something that's really interesting to me.
Yeah.
Because that's the hardest thing to do. To not have that little voice that censors yourself, or that little voice that tells you to stop. Don't act gay. Don't be that way. Don't, put on a persona when you're around people you don't know.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you've done that too.
Absolutely. Oh
where you have like your own fake straight guy persona that you put on. It's like clothing that you drop on.
Absolutely. I'm like, which jacket are we putting on today?
Yeah.
No, seriously.
Yeah.
I've had to, my best performance that I can think of, or at least where my skills, where I was like, okay, I can definitely do this, is, so I went to the French International School, right? School full of French white kids. Yeah. So my fashion, everything about me was definitely influenced by that school. So imagine Paul Marie, 13-year-old boy, tight-ass jeans.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
French.
So then I decide to leave the French system, and then I go to the American system.
Your super masculine French persona in America is not exactly what you thought it was.
No.
Yeah, exactly.
But here, this is how the universe was like, we're going to get you to really, we're going to shake you up a little bit. So right before I went to my high school where I ended up, which was Bethesda Chevy Chase, which is a affluent type of mostly white school, but also
Maryland, right?
Maryland, yeah. That was also pretty mixed. Before I got to there, because I wanted to do the IB program, it was right out of my consortium, so I had to transfer. So they said, okay, well, your transfer is going to take about a semester, so you have to do a semester somewhere. So I was basically where my house was. I was 10 minutes away from BCC, but 20 minutes away from either Wheaton High School or Blair High School, and I chose to go to Wheaton. So I was okay, let me take you to Wheaton. Wheaton High School at that time was rough, for sure, okay? It was rough at that moment. I don't know what it's like now. Don't know for anybody who's at Wheaton High School. Shout out to y'all. But I don't.
At the time,
it was rough.
Yeah.
There was like 3 white kids. So like, just so you know, like it was just
the opposite.
The opposite of where I was coming from.
Yeah.
That's cool. But you have to imagine, I'm also out of my element, right? Yeah. I'm not used to being around, not only to say this many brown people, but also there's African American. All my black friends are African.
It's different.
Yeah, it's completely different. So
explain that a bit, because I had a friend in college, because I was there briefly, but there was an African exchange student, and this guy on our little row of like rooms that was like I think he thought that it would, he's like, oh, it's like cool, like, and he thought it would just be instant, like, just gel instantly, and they did not.
Absolutely.
It's not that they didn't like each other, but they just did not mix.
Yeah.
Like they just didn't understand each other at all. And it was odd, because that was the first time when I was like, oh, you're right. It's a completely different culture.
Completely.
I think he was from Kenya. And so this is like some kid who grew up in, Southern California.
Yeah.
And it's like they were speaking a completely different language.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
So I got to Wheaton High School, not really knowing what to expect. I remember on my first day of school, got there and wearing my tight jeans and everything. And, fashion-wise, I wasn't aligning with everybody. Just overall vibe. I'm not, like, I don't know. I remember walking into the hallway and everybody's necks just went. And I looked at me because they thought, what?
This
like,
little,
what is going on here? What is
dressed
this?
in skinny jeans and,
So
fashion outfit.
And just maybe they can also just sense the anxiety that I was also probably giving off.
Probably. There's a bit, I mean, people that age have a homing, they can,
Absolutely.
Anxiety is like a,
they sense it.
They sense it like a lion. Yeah.
So I went to class. My first class I remember, and it was homeroom, and she did the attendance. Was it homeroom? I don't know. She did the attendance.
Yeah.
And I sat down, remember, in like somewhere in the corner, and she's going through the names. And also, there are stereotypical names that you see per culture, right? Different cultures. Like if you're in the Ivory Coast or West Africa, and you'll find 1,000 Kofis. So in America, there are also names that maybe are more typical in the black community. So she's going through the names. She's like, okay, Trayvon, boom, okay. Laquan, okay, here, boom. Taisha, I remember, here. Paul Marie, when I tell you, every single person in that classroom, Paul Marie,
Yeah.
and everything, I was absent that day.
Could have dropped it just to Paul.
Oh, absolutely. I didn't raise my hand. I was absent. She was just, okay, not here. Boom. I was like, there goes my perfect attendance record. But the next day, I definitely came up to her.
Please
like,
don't say my whole name.
I was like, yeah. I was like, by the way, I don't know if you called my name yesterday, but she was like, what was it? I was like, Paul Murray. She's like, yeah, I called you. I was like, oh, I didn't hear, but it's actually Paul. It's actually going to be Paul now. So she's like, oh, okay, but I like your name. No, girl, don't get me killed. We're going to do Paul. So that actually began my whole experience being at that school where I was able to be invisible, which was awesome because when I say invisible, I quickly like clocked what works and what doesn't work. So I remember that my first day when I came back home, I was like, Dad,
you put the
I need all
down
your jeans.
And you got the jeans.
Yeah. I was like, I was like, we're getting all my dad's jeans. That's all I wore during that first semester. And big ass t-shirts. Like I was, whatever it was, it worked. So I remember there was like freshman beatdown week.
It's funny because you threw away what people have to learn when they leave college and high school. They have to learn how to dress, learn how to put an outfit together, and you just were like, no, I'm good. I'm gonna wear what you guys are wearing.
Yeah, so absolutely. I'm gonna wear what y'all are wearing.
Yeah.
I knew also that wasn't my identity, so I was very conscious of the fact that I was putting on a show.
Right.
But hey, and scene. So every single day, I would just do that. The reason why this was relevant, we were talking about. How did I get?
Well, just how you are able to, rationalize the differences in your brain, and also with your environment. So when your environment changed, you went to the school.
I would change.
You had to kind of change.
Absolutely.
And you never really felt like yourself.
Not in public. No. I mean, there were certain friends I could be myself with. There were certain friends that I could feel that level of comfort.
Did any of your friends at that point know?
No, I had great friends.
Did you hold it?
I held it in.
Completely in.
They knew. Well, you mean at Wheaton High School?
Yes.
Oh no. Yeah. But once I went to BCC, there were people who probably suspected, and I think there was always maybe a talk here and there. Is Paul straight or whatever? But for the most part, everyone really. I felt loved, supported, and
that's good.
Yeah.
But when you were growing up too, there was no friend, no confidant, no nothing.
Absolutely.
I didn't have that either.
Oh really?
I was. No.
Yeah. How old were you when you came out?
22.
To yourself?
Oh no.
How old were you?
That was probably. Well, because I'm bi, it was
okay.
It's harder. Because then you're just like, is this what's wrong with me?
Exactly.
Why
Yeah.
And I would be very smart about if I was, girls wise, it was fine, right? Because that's just normal. Guy wise, if I would find friends that I was not interested in any way.
Okay.
So my friends, would be people that I have no, no interest in at all.
Yeah.
Because then I could feel like, okay, at least this is not awkward. And then, people that I would be interested in would be way over there and never would even have spoken to them. I was very compartmentalized. I would not allow that to merge together. I still kind of do that because I don't want, it's just kind of messy to be, having friends and then also being it's just, but back then it was for a very specific reason.
Yeah.
So I would my whole life was compartmentalized and which is not healthy. But, it did develop that similar. That's why when you talk about it being formulaic, I had that similar kind of I had to have to, every single thing I'd have to analyze and rationalize in a sequence. And then if it made sense, then I could move forward.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But you know what? That whole chapter, for me at least, and this is the fun part of my journey, there was a direct correlation between where I was at in my head, the prison that I was in, and how I was unable to fully express myself creatively. So there was that, because for some reason now, I'm here in LA and doing what I've always wanted to do, what I've always dreamt about doing, what I always knew what I was meant to do. But
which is
acting.
Okay.
Oh, acting.
You didn't tell anybody.
Yeah, it's not bad. But Because at that time, I guess in high school, I was still living in that world where I was people pleasing and doing, trying to.
You had to become a good actor.
Yeah, I had to become a good
practice.
actor. But you'll ask, like, maybe why is it that I didn't pursue acting sooner? It's because I was still in the mindset of I still have to please other people.
Right.
So me pursuing acting is not something that is supported by either my parents or whatever. So for my 20s, what I did was waste time doing what I thought they would want me to do.
Like what? Like what were they? The doctor or lawyer kind of thing?
Yeah. And I mean, mostly politics, right? Because you live in DC, that's what you do.
Yeah.
So when I ended up in politics and working for the Democratic Party, and it sent me in Michigan. I lived in Kalamazoo for about 6 months, working on a congressional race. And no, I left right when it got cold.
Okay. Ice.
Yes.
Yeah.
The election was November 6th. November 7th, I was like, I'll see y'all. But yeah, that was me trying to, again, do what everybody else wanted to do.
I couldn't do that.
To keep them happy.
Yeah.
Until everything happened with the whole coming out, go to Amsterdam. And then from there, in the silence of trying to figure out what I want, I realized this is what I want to do. And ironically, when you make that decision, I feel like the universe just kind of starts getting out of your way.
Right.
And at least for me, that's what kind of happened. So I'm really thankful to that Amsterdam trip, because a lot of transformation happened there.
I think it was good for you too to maybe have some space to recharge and figure out what you wanted to do.
I would say, yeah, more than space. One thing that I learned, and I also would love to share with people, which is I came to the realization that in order to heal from your triggers, you need to be away from them. You can't aspire to ever heal if you're constantly being triggered. It's just hard.
Describe what those triggers were for you.
So, for example, me, my family, my parents, right? Me being far away from my mom and from my parents and from that negativity is what allowed me to, over the course of that year, come back to me. And the result at the end was a more fortified me, which could then go back to these people.
It wasn't that you didn't care for them. You needed time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I needed space to, I needed space to come back into my power.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I guess the metaphor I can use is every time my parents would trigger me, those blows, right? Those blows that would throw at me would knock me down. Right. I would get knocked down. So I'm like, how the fuck am I going to get up and dust myself off if I keep getting knocked down? Which, of course, I didn't realize that. But in hindsight, I'm realizing, I needed to be away. I needed to get away. So I encourage everybody, that whatever situation you're in, I know it's easier said than done, but if there's a way for you to remove yourself from a situation where that beating's not happening, it's in that space that you can aspire to get yourself up and build yourself back up. At least for me. Now, if you're able to still get punches and rebuild yourself, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, that's amazing. I know that's not me, but that's amazing.
So where was your dad in all this? What was his take on it? Because we talked about your mom a bit and how she still struggles with it a bit.
Yeah.
And you guys have kind of, you're working through that.
Yeah.
But what was his take?
We had it's funny because there was a switch that happened with my parents. So growing up, I wasn't really that close to my dad.
Isn't that weird? That happens. That happened to me too.
Mm-hmm.
It's very odd.
Very strange.
Yeah.
I was not expecting it, I wasn't expecting it that way. My dad and I just always had more of a distant relationship. It was never, matter of fact, the way that because he was very much of a disciplinarian, right? So the way that he would discipline me really just caused us to just even more further, for me not to want to associate. But then I come out, that whole thing happened, my mom blows up in that way, and he actually tells me immediately on the spot, I love you, there's nothing wrong with you, and I accept you, and I just want you to know there's nothing wrong with you. So then I know.
Wow.
I know, that was crazy. I was like,
you glossed over that. You buried the lead. You buried the lead there.
I know.
That's amazing.
I know.
Yeah.
So when that happened, real quick. When he said that to me, I remember just falling to my knees and just crying and just being so thankful, right?
Yeah.
And what transpired over the next kind of 2 or 3 days afterwards was my mom and I were not really talking. Mm-hmm. But when I was in the house, I felt like at least my dad was my support,
Like in your corner.
in my corner, until I realized, of course, he, is trying to say the right thing, doesn't know he's getting blowback from my mom for being supportive and all that stuff. So he then said to me the next day, he's like, okay, well, Paul, can I talk to you? And came down and he said, so are you planning on having kids? And I said, yes, I'm actually definitely planning on having kids. He said, but how? And I was like, well, through surrogacy. Like straight people do that too. So, yeah.
Kim Kardashian did it.
Hello?
Man. Come on, hello.
Yeah. So I said surrogacy, and he said, he made the hurtful comment of a child born out of surrogacy to him won't be his grandchild. Like he doesn't want that. And what happened at that moment was probably the most pivotal kind of like climax of what transpired after, because as soon as he said that, I remember just getting up, leaving. I went straight up to my old room upstairs, hopped in the shower. For some reason, I just went to hop in the shower. And in that shower, I cried from the depths of my soul. I just remember I had never really felt sorrow in that way.
Yeah.
Just because I really, in that moment, felt like I had just lost my last ally. So I was alone. And I remember feeling like I didn't want to die, but I didn't want to be there. So it's not like I wanted to go jump into traffic, but I just did not want to be here. I don't want to be here.
It sucked the life out of you.
Exactly. Get me out of here. But I'm very lucky because once I got to that very, very, very low point, I guess naturally I just almost ricocheted off the bottom and then slowly started making an ascension towards coming back, right? Which lasted for a few months, years, whatever it is. But there was still that ricochet that happened. And then I realized in that moment, my empathy grew a little bit more as far as for people who go as far as taking their own lives. Because before, I could never really understand it. Like, I was like, oh my God, but you're going to kill yourself? Like, I never understood that. Like, how could things be so bad that you're going to make a decision so permanent? I didn't judge, but I just didn't understand. But when I got to that place all the way down there and I realized there was more to go, like, I'm choosing to stop here.
I can't go anymore.
But I'm standing at the edge of it and realizing there is a shit ton more to go. Like, I could feel it. And I realized, oh, when you're down there, that is when that looks like the best option. And then that, for me, I don't know why, it was just very eye-opening, where I realized, okay, my empathy towards people in general, I think, just grew so much. But yeah, I started making my slow ascension towards rebuilding myself. A month later, moved to Amsterdam, and then everything else started to kind of like happen. But I'll never forget that moment, just because I had never been that low, ever.
It probably was not only what he said, but also just the convergence of so many things at once. It just was like the last
it was the last straw. It was the last straw.
You just couldn't anymore.
Like, I was broken. In that moment, I was broken.
Because I have to imagine too, over time when you were growing up, at least I experienced this somewhat, is, your parents could be wonderful people, but they're products of the environment they're in. So, you see, a smaller child, younger, when you see gay people on TV, or and there's a stigma to it, and there's this, the culture hadn't quite shifted yet to accepting it a bit more.
Yeah.
You internalize those things that are said, and you hear those things that are said, and there's propositions in the government or different things that are trying to, deny people the right to get married, or all these different things, and it's rationalized on TV as, being some religious thing, and it's an affront to, the culture, and regular, good, upstanding people don't do this, and that kind of thing. And so you process those things as well over time. You start to, you think about those things growing up, and those things stay with you too. So even today, I'll think back to those moments and be like, oh, and it just, you wish you could undo it.
Yeah.
But I have to imagine that moment that kind of broke for you was all, not just that week, it had to have been, what age were you at? I mean, it had to have been 20 years of build
29,
up, it had to have been built up for
quite some
almost 30 years. So you have, all of this that's still in there, even if you're not actively thinking about it. And that's what people, I don't think, understand, is that, it's not like you getting a bad grade in school. It's that doesn't define you. When it's something that defines you and you're being told that it's wrong or it's evil, worse, you have to find a way to blend in with everyone else, which means you're always going to be living a life that doesn't reflect you at all. And there is a breaking point for those people. You cannot do that forever. I don't care how long you do it. I know people do it until they're in their 60s, 70s, and 80s, but at some point it will break.
Of course.
And it's only the longer you wait, the worse it's going to get. And that's something that's really, it's not surprising to me that was your reaction, but it has to have been surprising for you in that moment. You have to have been just like, maybe not even understanding why you were so affected by that.
Yeah.
Because on its face, if he says something like that, that's awful, but I feel like it was bigger.
It was definitely bigger. I would say the surprise element would be
because he had just said too.
Yeah.
He had just like it's gonna, it's okay,
Yeah.
and then you're like,
and then that happens.
come on.
I would say the element that was the most surprising was once I got to that low, was just how low I felt. Because to be honest, maybe now in retrospect, I realize I always anticipated that to transpire, which is why I stayed in the closet for so long. Right. I must have been fearing something, and I was fearing, I think, the feeling that they gave me. That is what I knew what was coming. So I just didn't know how bad it was going to be. I guess I knew it was bad, hence why, I was ready to be in the closet my whole life. But once you're in it and you really do feel, I don't know, being in it is different.
I think you reach a breaking point. What sounds good when you're 25 doesn't sound as good when you're 29. You're like, okay, I can't. Yeah. This is. I thought I could do this forever. I could do it a couple of years and I'm done.
Yeah.
I can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
that's such a that's such a difficult thing to come through, because you've also built it up for so long. It's been not only ingrained from the outside, you've been ingraining it into you from the inside and pushing it down. And it's not just going to just bubble up and everything's going to be okay. You're going to have to unwind all of that. Every single time you put yourself down or you felt like you were put down, all those different things, those are still there. You're going to have to unwind them. Even if you don't remember them specifically, it's part of just the entire thing.
Absolutely.
And I think that's something that people don't really understand, is that when someone comes to terms with that, it's a big deal, and it shouldn't be a big deal, but you guys have made it a big deal. So now it is a big deal. It wouldn't have to be a big deal if they would just accept it from the get-go. But because of all these other reasons, religion and culture and tradition and all these things, which are, some of those things are wonderful, but when it harms people like that and you have this like internalized hating your own self, it can only go one way, which is it just implodes. There's no good end to that. So I think that people that are listening to your story and listening to what you're saying are probably asking themselves, they're asking one of two things. They're asking, at what point is it going to happen to me? And or they're probably something that I would say if I was listening to this would be saying some reason why you're different, a different case. So when I'm listening to you say this, but I think I can do it forever. Rationalizing to yourself, well, that happened to him and that's awful, but I think I could live like that forever.
That's where I was at.
And the reality is you probably can't.
Oh, well, the reality actually for some is
not be happy.
Yeah. But exactly, be happy. But the thing is, true happiness, right? I mean, this feeling that I have now, I never would have imagined, even in my wildest dream, what it would be like to feel this way. Yeah. So it's still, you almost don't miss what you don't know. You know what I'm saying? It's not. I never got a taste of it. It's never. I was like, oh my God, that one time I was so free and I was just myself. So I just never knew it. So for me, it was just almost foreign. Like it was foreign, and because I didn't know it, I didn't miss it. Now, fast forward to now, where I'm at now, would I ever allow myself to go back to that? Absolutely not.
Do you ever feel like you have situations though where you do? Because we talked about this a little bit, but do you feel like in certain situations where you are not comfortable, we all have those situations where we're around people we don't know. Do you kind of tuck it in a little bit, or are you comfortable enough to just, this is me and that's it?
I check in with myself. So I of course, let's say if I go to the barbershop, and, you know, maybe you don't know this, but in the Black community, the barbershop is a notorious homophobic playground. So I would, you know, my whole life.
The barbershop?
I know the barbershop. What?
It's not a salon.
Right, right.
It's not, yeah.
And I would always be uncomfortable going into one, right?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
I'd be uncomfortable. I'd be, even as I'm sitting there, I'm aware of...
You just feel out of place.
I feel out of place, but I'm also so hyper aware about my mannerisms and stuff like that, that I'm actually so
inflection
uncomfortable.
of your voice, the way you, what words you say.
Whereas now, before I go into the barbershop, that same feeling arises for sure. It's like autopilot. But what happens then is that I check in with myself and say, me being feminine, or me being not feminine, but more feminine than others, or just even me being gay, do I genuinely think or believe that there is anything wrong with that? Like, actually, Paul, do you really think there is something wrong with that?
Yeah.
If I tell myself absolutely not, I genuinely don't think so, but guess what? Now I have enough information to understand why it is that they have an issue with it, right? I understand now why you've been conditioned to think this way, and I understand why you see things the way that you think that they are. I don't subscribe to that, so I'm going to walk in here as authentically me as possible, or else I'm giving power to what your beliefs.
Right.
I'm saying, you are right. You're right. It is a little bit. I don't agree with it. So that's what I mean by not betraying myself. I'm not going to betray myself in this process and be something that I'm not, right? I've checked in with myself. Paul, there's nothing wrong with you being this way. Cool. Walk in here. Just walk in here. Just because you deserve to be here and you have the right to be here just as much as homie over there.
Did that take time and effort to not worry about the way you move your hands and the way you talk and the way you... Because that's, I think, something that probably most every
it took time
person can relate to.
And it took practice.
Yeah.
So my
to not do it.
To not do it.
Because you've probably developed such a good way of doing it that you had to unlearn this behavior. I
will say I think your thought patterns, the way that you think, also follow the physical laws of inertia, right? So inertia says an object in motion wants to stay in motion, an object at rest wants to stay at rest. I think the way that you think also, if you give it enough time, if you persist in a direction, eventually it becomes autopilot. You just become that way.
Right.
So that's what I've aspired to. I think every time anytime something unpleasant does arise, I consciously deal with it in the way that I hope to do one day on autopilot. I'm like, it's okay. Right now it's taking me a little longer to feel comfortable. That's fine. My goal is to be comfortable. Yeah. So we're just going to walk in here with our head up, held high, and just believe that we are enough.
I think that's the biggest challenge for people, at least people in our situation.
But it's the repeated action of something that I think eventually makes it a part of your identity.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's a good point. I think over time,
it becomes, if you just persist, I think
you also forget how long you had you learned to be that way. Yeah. And pretend that it's not just gonna like overnight be over. You know what I mean? It's not like that's just it's a very unique situation, and that's something that I think a lot of people can relate to, though. Yeah. Because it's on the one hand, it's very unique to people who feel different, but on the other hand, it's something that I think pretty much anyone can identify a situation where they feel like they weren't, they didn't feel like they fit in. Yeah. And so what do you do when you don't fit in? You start to look and learn the mannerisms and learn how to dress the way that these guys are dressing, and learn how to talk the way they talk, and how to, it's you kind of become who you hang out with. Yeah. And you have certain words you say around certain people when they say these things, but when those are all things that are superficial, it's different when you're talking about who you are. Yeah. That's a very different thing. And
but who you are, I guess one thing I've realized is, we live in an age where everyone's talking about manifestation, like manifesting this, manifesting whatever. And there's a truth to that for sure. But I think the how do I say this? The deeper truth in manifestation is that you manifest into reality your subconscious beliefs. The things that you actually really internalize and believe about yourself are the ones that play out into this three-dimensional reality actually that we're in. So I'm like, okay, with that belief gives me the, like, how do I say this? Like, I believe that I have the power to then create that reality, right? So I just have to figure out, what are these beliefs? How do I see myself? How do I truly see myself? Not consciously, but subconsciously. How do I see myself? And like I said, working on all these disempowering beliefs that I did have, which were a lot of them, eventually allowed me to start shaping my reality in a way that was more aligned with who I really am, right? So you are your thoughts in a way. You become your thoughts.
Your thoughts become your
reality.
Your reality. So that's something that's very difficult.
It's difficult
to undo.
for sure. I guess there's no like easy fix, but I guess if people turn more inwards, that's probably the best way to go, because I feel like this thing called God, spirit, whatever it is, everything that is created, right, by that energy is, in my opinion, innately guided to, or internally guided to be able to navigate their reality. So, for example, animals, when geese are born and they know how to migrate south, right? There's no school for that, but they are born with a genetic coding in them that tells them what they should do. I saw this quote, which I'm not going to be doing diligence and how eloquent it was, but it basically said, the same way that spirit would create a goose and program it for it to know when to fly south, when it flies south, it's sure to find sunshine over there, because spirit, whatever you want to call it, universe, would never have you coded this way for you to get there and it's a fucking tundra and die. Do you see what I'm saying? Like it'll never work out that way. It's always going to be in alignment for it to work out perfectly. So with animals, we call it instinct, but with us humans, I think it's your intuition. Yeah. Intuitively, you know how to navigate this reality. It will not do you wrong. It definitely won't. Your intuition will not. I really, 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 really believe that. So I think if people, now, how do you shut off the noise of everybody else's opinions, all the other things that are going on? You know what I'm saying? Like, that's the real gift, right? Being able to shut out all of the noise and be able to say, okay, I feel like this is what I'm supposed to do. Yeah. So checking in with yourself I think, is the quickest way to really overcome any self-hatred you have. Because if you hear that voice inside, it's not going to say, you're disgusting. Right. You're going to be hearing your mom's voice or your dad's voice or your church's voice saying you're disgusting, but you'll never hear that inner voice saying you are an abomination, because never. Yeah. So.
What would Paul Marie, the actor, say to Paul Marie, the kid sitting in class? Preferably something positive. No, preferably something positive. Not a slap in the back of the head.
Wake up. Yeah. What would he say? I would just try to say to give myself more grace to grow, and more patient with myself early on.
What do you mean?
I think my perfectionist type of way of thinking.
Were you impatient with yourself?
Mm-hmm. Because I was comparing myself with others, right? Mm-hmm. So I knew after high school, I knew already that I wanted to pursue acting. And I had I auditioned for High School Musical 3, and one of the friends that I made on that set, he went on to move to LA. We were in high school, and he was pursuing acting, and eventually he got a role on Glee or something. Mm-hmm. And I remember that really hit me, just because I felt like, oh my God, Paul, like, you have the same dream to go over there, and he went out, and look, he's working, and what are you doing? Like, and even though I'm in that space, I'm also in the space of, but I can't go, but I'm afraid to go, And what's the reason that you give yourself why you can't? I was just, it was easy because my parents didn't really support it. So it was more like,
you just threw it on them.
I just threw it on them. They don't support me. Well, darn. Exactly. But that's not a real reason. But that was enough for me to at least sleep at night. Like, that was because of my parents. So, yeah. I would say to myself, just give yourself a little bit more grace. You're gonna end up where you want to end up. Just just let yourself get there organically. Divine timing, I really believe in that also. I think when you plant a seed, it doesn't turn into a 10-foot palm in a day, so I also have to give time for things to grow the way that they're meant to grow, and surrender almost, like, okay, set your attention. And
what would you say to someone who's in maybe a similar situation and is stuck between, wanting to be honest and not wanting or the fear of losing their family? Because I mean, that tends to be the biggest reason.
Well, I know it's a little bit of a mind fuck, but the fear of losing your family, I don't think you'll ever lose your family per se, right? If they find out who you really are and choose not to be with you or not to have you around, then they were not meant to be with you in the first place, right? Your authentic self, how you were created to be. There are certain things we would be like, okay, then they're just crazy. So for example, if I said your skin color, you're born into a white family and you have blue eyes and your family's like, oh my God, you have blue eyes. Like, we don't fuck with you because of that. Everybody here got brown. We're not doing that. So you have to go. You would actually just be like, I'm sorry, what? Mm-hmm. But for some reason, when it comes to sexuality, sexuality is just another attribute, another trait.
I think because it's rationalized as being a choice, that you're just making this bad choice, and we just wish you made a better choice.
But if you made a choice or not. You know, nobody's in your head with you. You know if you're making a choice, and that's it. You know what I'm saying? It's one of those things where it's like no one's in your head but you, so you know if this is something that you are choosing or if it's not. And if it's not something that you chose, and you've come to terms with that, then we can start building towards accepting yourself. But I guess if your family doesn't accept you, I know trust me, I've heard this before before I was out, and I was like, okay, if they don't accept you, they don't deserve you. I've heard that many times.
Yeah, and that doesn't help.
It doesn't help.
It's sweet, but it doesn't help.
Exactly.
It's
exactly.
one of those things where it's like, thank you, but it also doesn't help.
You just, I guess, have to get to the point where you're like, I want to be accepted for who I am, not who I'm pretending to be. I don't know. That's for me, I guess.
Yeah.
I was like, this is.
Well, and the whole point of it being a choice, it's like you're an African man from Ivory Coast, mm-hmm. who's also probably Catholic. Why would you choose?
Ish.
I mean, when you were
growing up, yeah.
Why would you choose that?
Why would I
for
choose
yourself?
That? Like, because life is so great.
Let's just toss this on top of it.
Mm-hmm. Wait, you want me to be?
I'm one of 2 black kids at my school, give or take. Mm-hmm. I don't feel like I belong there. Mm-hmm. The reality is, kids are ruthless.
Yes, they are.
I mean, if it wasn't that, it was going to be something else. Mm-hmm. So why would you choose on top of all that? Let's just choose to be gay too. Let's make it a 3-peat. Mm-hmm. That's something that's really,
absolutely.
Really, it always boggles my mind.
I think as a society, we all just want to fit in, right? Yeah. We all just want to fit in. But we should realize that notion of fitting in is actually not real.
There's things that we all have in common.
Yeah.
But that doesn't need to be everything.
It doesn't need to be everything.
Why does it need to be everything?
No 2 people have everything in common.
Yeah.
No 2 people have everything in common. So the whole notion of fitting in, actually, it's silly. It's more of a finding the people who are going to accept you for who you are. Because fitting in, it's like, okay, however you want to categorize it. Okay, I'm a man, so I feel comfortable with men. Okay, well, amongst these men, as a black man, some of these men are white racist men. Some of them are black and homophobic. Some of them are, do you see what I'm saying? So I'm just trying to fit in and feel comfortable with me with me. And then other people who feel good with me are going to, I think, be drawn to me. Mm-hmm. And then that's how you build your community, And
what would you say to your parents?
I would tell them I love them. I think that's really it. I realize that is the international kind of healing elixir, right? Which is really unconditional love. So because I make allowance for where they're at and actually understand why they believe the things they do believe.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna love them through it and just be patient. That's my thing, just patience, and I'm gonna love you through it. It's gonna be uncomfortable, sure, sometimes, whatever, but I can't ask for unconditional love if I can't give it. So I also know that people can only love you at their level of awareness. So you're not doing better because you literally don't know better.
Right.
If you did, you would do better.
That makes sense.
You know what I'm saying? So it's like, okay, I'm going to help you see that light. But until then, I can't really get mad at you. You know, if a kid were to walk up to me and say like something really rude, like, you're ugly or something, I would never just take that and be like, oh my God, I'm sad, I'm depressed because a kid said that to me. I would take those words and be like, okay.
Right back at you. No.
Yeah. Hello?
I guess we found out who the
Your
petty
mom-
one is.
Yeah.
I guess.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
He's all taking the high road over here.
No, but I guess what I'm saying is those words would have no effect on me. And,
right.
and to everybody also. Like if a 5-year-old says something to you, you're not going to take their words seriously, right?
No,
So,
I agree. I got to call my niece, by the way.
Yeah.
Apologize.
So that's why I'm like, I'm treating, I guess, my parents like those 5-year-olds in the sense that you don't know better in this sense. So the things that you're saying, okay, I don't agree. And I'll tell you why I don't agree.
Yeah.
But okay.
I think that's something that's kind of lost right now too, is being able to disagree without like going the other way and just hating the person.
Mm-mm.
It's very, the goal should be to be trying to enlighten them.
Yes.
Not to, and you need to be able to stand your ground and not fold, but like you were saying, you're kind of chipping away at it.
Yeah, a little bit.
You're doing what you can.
My dad, because you asked me about my dad earlier, he, even though him and I were not close for the longest time, funny enough, me going through my whole spiritual journey and growing allowed me on the other side of it to not judge any of his past actions or transgressions against me. Because I realize now more than clear as daylight is that you are a direct result of your childhood drama that you haven't processed. You are a direct result of that. Like the same way that I'm also that for my own traumas. So
he's just further down the road
and hasn't even chipped at trying to work through them. He doesn't even know that there is anything to work through, right? Because he's on autopilot. So, anything that's happened to me in my childhood, it's just a norm. Of course. Oh my God, it's okay. It's a norm. This is a good example that I want to put out for all my black friends out there. I was living in Amsterdam, and this is towards the end of my journey over there, and I was sitting having lunch with 4 of my friends, so me and 4 other white boys who are Dutch, and we were talking at one point about discipline, how to discipline your kids, and I was saying how I was definitely hit before, like beat before, but I asked them, I was like, let me guess, none of you guys have ever been hit by your parents? And they all looked at each other and looked at me and said, no, we haven't. And my first reaction was actually almost to laugh and say, oh my God, white people, you guys have never been disciplined that way. Until I realized, Paul, the joke is on you, because this is 4 examples of adults who made it into adulthood successful, happy, balanced for the most part, I don't know, but not needing to be traumatized in the way that you were, right? So
just because you went through it doesn't mean you get to put someone else through it too.
And it shows me that it's not necessary. It shows me you can get to adulthood fully functional or whatever without having to.
And you kind of were it's just like the sky above your head. It was just a matter of fact. This is how it is, and you're growing up, and you guys are weird.
Yeah, and actually the reason why we were talking about that is because I was saying with my kids, I was like, if they need it, I'll give them a little.
Beat that out.
Yeah, I remember saying that. I was like, I'll definitely. I was like, listen, if my kid is
How about a little threat, a little fear? No,
hello,
just a little half. I'm actually gonna hit you, but I'm gonna threaten. Yeah.
But the reason why that was okay with me is because it had happened to me.
There is a difference too between, being firm with a child, and I do notice some, especially Europeans, there's too far too where you're just letting the kid do whatever, just run wild, and there's no. It's like they're trying to be like their friend. it's good to have like an authority that tells you, okay, here's, you know, the boundaries, because you're going to have to learn that anyway. But it's like you're saying, like, you don't need to go like here, you can go, or here, you can kind of, maybe there's things that you grew up that made you into a better person that you would like to incorporate, but maybe without the hitting.
Without the hitting,
you know,
I want you to do it because you respect me.
But you might still be firm on certain things and want, you know, here's how things need to be.
Absolutely.
Because on the flip side, I know plenty of you know, specifically like Euro friends of mine that I'm just like, you talk to your parents like that? Like,
It's crazy. Yeah.
like, because I didn't get beat, but we got like hit on like the ass and stuff, like as a kid, and it wasn't fun. But that stopped towards like the early thousands, like late 90s. It's like something. I'm sure it was like started to become more of a conversation of like, maybe this isn't the right way to do it, because they got hit as a kid.
Okay. You see?
And I remember hearing the stories. They were getting beat and hit with a belt and all this stuff. And you know, I think my dad probably, I never asked him why it stopped, but I think he just kind of was like, I don't need to keep doing this. So this isn't working. It doesn't do anything.
No.
So, it was a little more psychological, you know.
Yeah.
I'm gonna take this away.
Yeah.
And then like, no, you know, that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
that more than getting hit, like, you know, doing things to me like that, taking, you know, it's finding something that I like a video game or something that I like, and taking it away for 6 months. Like that would, you know, snap me into place much quicker than, you know, you hit me on the ass for a few minutes. It's like, well, okay, now I'm good, whatever.
Yeah.
Versus this was a long thing.
Yeah.
It was always the joke that I would hear. It'd be like, no, you're not going to your room. Go to the garage. Your toys are in your room. Go to the garage. You know, go find something to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're not, you know, I'm not sending you to your room. Your toys are there. So there's ways of, you know, learning from your childhood in a way that maybe he didn't.
Yes.
And that's not to say that he, you know, did anything wrong. It's just, you're just trying to be better.
Yes.
Than that, because you know how it affected you.
Yes.
So
now having that information allows me to also have more empathy towards him, the way I treat him. You know, I've forgiven him
imagine
for the
how
past.
his grandfather was treated as a kid. You know what I mean? Like I've heard stories of my grandparents of how they were treated as a kid.
Yeah.
And it's just like, whoa.
Absolutely.
Like really, and then, you know, the further back you go, the worse it gets. It just gets more and more like they were just.
And that generation, you know, they didn't even bother. They were not even in a school of thought where you could think, oh, maybe something's wrong with the way that I think.
It was just
a norm.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, this is normal. So
This
you're
is
not
just
even
the way it
questioning. This is the way it is. It's just the way it is.
Yeah.
So that has helped me and my dad a lot, just because now I'm at that point where, okay, I kind of see the bigger picture of where, like, kind of what led to the actions that you chose to take. And I'm choosing to forgive you, but also love you through it, right?
And change maybe how I address those same things in the future. Yeah, that's. I mean, it's like I said, it's mature.
Yeah, you know, for anybody that's going through any kind of situation like this with your family and coming out, I would say, if you're a spiritual person and you believe in like souls and whatever, I think we have a linear way of thinking of, you have your parents. Your parents give birth to the child, and the parents help the child grow. It just keeps moving that way. But there's nothing that actually states that that's the way it's supposed to be. You could be born into your family with as much purpose for you to help them grow as it, maybe more. There's probably more potential for you to help them unpack the things that have, you know, hurt them over the years than the other way around, right? For you, they should be trying to prevent said trauma to be implemented into your life. But for you, you have the power in a way to help them undo it. So if anything, I see it now in the dynamic where, like, it's very equal with my parents. You know, I'm learning from you, but you're also, I'm here to help you learn also. Right. Like, that is just the truth. Like, where this is a symbiotic relationship. So if you're a person that's dealing with that with your family, just know, if you've gone to the place of at least starting to accept yourself, also realize you could be a part of their salvation and their I guess, awakening to the truth, which is like universal love, right? Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes kids are teachers.
So, lastly, I guess now that we get caught up to your life, what are you doing now?
So now I'm finally made it to LA, 10 years in the making, and acting, and it's going really well as far as being able to have like opportunities that I wouldn't have had otherwise. But it actually started in Amsterdam. So Amsterdam, when I was over there in the quiet, is when I realized I want to act. And then from there, I actually started acting in Amsterdam.
What was the catalyst, What made you just... I
always knew that that's what I wanted to do. But over there, I guess, no more politics. Can't go over there and work in Dutch politics. I don't speak Dutch.
It's probably a good move. It seems like just a draining type of job.
Absolutely.
Like I know people that do it. It just seems horrible.
It drains my soul.
It seems awful.
So once I asked myself and thought, what is it that I want to do? I want to start acting. Kind of asked the universe if I could start doing that. And I know they say if you ask, you shall receive. I guess for me that proved to be right, because then I started to be able to work professionally quite quickly over there. And this weird thing happened where as soon as the boulder, the figurative boulder that was my insecurities that I had built up over the years from my family started to get eroded and eventually demolished, I was able to tap into a lot more of my creativity than I had ever been. Like I always knew I had a potential. I knew I was, for example, a good dancer, a good actor, whatever. But for some reason, I always felt like I didn't have the ability to really dip into that well of potential. I knew it was there. I just felt, so for some reason, I'm like, I can't get it. But after that, in Amsterdam, for some reason, I felt like I had full access. And then that's where my true blossoming happened. And then now, once that happened, I thought, okay, I'm ready for LA. So here I am, and meeting new cool people every day and along this journey. And yeah, I wake up excited every day.
Yeah.
I just feel, and I also feel a sense of like protectedness from the universe, from God, whatever it is. I feel protected. So now I'm able to, the reason why that's relevant is because now fear is no longer an issue. I can just go and try. And if I fail, I fail, right? But I'm not afraid to try anymore. So we'll see where that takes me.
That's amazing. I mean, thank you. I think that's a good way to like wrap it. I mean, that's incredible.
Thank you.
You have such a great, it took you a long way to get to where you are now, but you have like this, it's almost like you have this experience of all these years, and you have a grasp of it now. Which is really cool.
Or at least I'm starting to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Well, thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
And we'll go do our portrait in a second.
Okay.
But thank you for coming and talking to me and sharing that with me, and that's amazing. Tell everybody how to find you.
You can find me on Instagram at Paul with 2 L's _MARIE on Instagram, and on Twitter at Paul Marie Brew, PaulMarieBrou.
Cool. All right. Tell everyone goodbye. Cool. That's awesome.